When Akio Toyoda explained why Toyota was walking back into Formula One, he didn't talk about winning or trophies or the roar of a crowd. He used three words: people, product, pipeline. Two of those are corporate wallpaper, the kind of thing every chairman says. The third one, in the context of a Formula One partnership, is worth stopping on. Because pipeline, in a sport where the single most valuable commodity is data flowing off a car, is a very specific word to choose. And once you understand what it actually points at, the entire Haas partnership stops looking like a sponsorship and starts looking like something with a direction of travel, a slow, deliberate shift in who really runs the engineering of an entire Formula One team. Look at the surface and it's a feel-good story. A struggling American minnow lands a giant Japanese backer, gets a cash injection, a coat of fresh paint, a lifeline. Everybody wins. But watch where the actual technical control is migrating, quietly, month by month. And ask who's going to own the knowledge that makes that car fast when the dust settles. If you want to understand why the most important takeover in the paddock didn't involve buying a single share, and why the team that used to hold all the power over Haas may slowly be losing it, stay with this and get subscribed, because this isn't a story about a logo on a side pod. It's about who controls the brain of a race team. To see what's shifting, you have to understand who used to be in control. Because for a decade, it wasn't Gene Haas. It was Ferrari. Haas built itself, deliberately, as the leanest operation on the grid. It bought its engine from Maranello, its gearbox and suspension from Maranello, ran its cars through Ferrari's wind tunnel, and prepared for races on Ferrari's simulator. That arrangement kept Haas cheap and competitive. But it came with an invisible price. When you develop your car inside another team's building on their hardware, that team sees everything you do. Ferrari didn't just supply Haas. It had a clear, constant view into exactly how its customer was thinking. That visibility was a quiet form of control. That's the control that's now, piece by piece, being rebuilt around a different center of gravity. And the crucial thing, the part the dramatic version of this story always gets wrong, is that none of it involves taking anything from Ferrari. It involves Toyota building Haas its own version of everything Ferrari used to provide. Start with the people, because that's the first of Toyota's three words, and the most visible. Under the partnership's development program, Toyota has embedded its own engineers, aerodynamicists, and mechanics directly into the Haas operation, including trackside, on a race weekend, at the pit wall. Now, the tempting version of this story says those engineers are there to secretly harvest Ferrari's data and smuggle it back to Japan. Let's be careful, because that's exactly the line that turns a real story into a fabricated one. There's no evidence of theft here, and the arrangement is disclosed. Haas has been explicit that it gives Ferrari full transparency, with clear agreements protecting each company's intellectual property. Nobody is stealing secrets in the dark. But you don't need theft for the shift to be real, because those embedded Toyota engineers are learning, legally, openly, in the most demanding environment in motorsport, exactly how a modern Formula One car behaves, how a ground effect floor loads up in dirty air, how to run a race weekend, call a strategy, read live telemetry under pressure. That knowledge is the actual product of a Formula One team, and Toyota is acquiring it in real time, on Haas's car, at Haas's races. Not Ferrari's secrets. Something more durable. The operational knowledge of how to be a Formula One team at all. And that's the thing money genuinely struggles to buy in a hurry. You can build a factory in 2 years and hire 500 people in 1. What you cannot shortcut is the institutional muscle memory of running a competitive Grand Prix operation. The 1,000 small judgments a race team makes under pressure that only come from having done it, weekend after weekend, at the sharp end. New manufacturers usually have to buy that education the hard way, with years of public failure. Toyota is getting it quietly, on someone else's entry, at someone else's races. And that's the second word, product, which brings us to the most important word, and the one that gives this whole thing its shape, pipeline. The flow of data, and more importantly, where that flow now runs. Understand what data means in modern Formula One, because it's the entire game. A current car generates gigabytes every lap. Tire surface temperatures, underbody pressures, suspension loads, the exact behavior of the car in 100 conditions no simulation fully captures. That real-world data is what you feed back into your development tools to make the next upgrade work. It's the raw material of speed. Whoever controls that flow, who gathers it, who analyzes it, who decides what it means, controls the direction the car develops in. For a decade, that flow ran one way, off the Haas car and back to Italy. Changing where it runs isn't a small administrative detail. It's moving the single most valuable resource a team has. For its entire history, the technical brain of Haas physically sat in Italy. The simulator that sets up the car, Ferraris, in Maranello. The wind tunnel, Ferraris. Every development direction the team explored ran through Maranello first, which meant Ferrari always knew, in detail, what its customer was building. Toyota looked at that and did something quietly decisive. It built Haas a brain of its own, and it did so as a company that had learned painfully what the alternative costs. The last time Toyota was in Formula One, through the 2000s, it did everything the conventional way. Its own full works team, run out of a vast facility in Cologne, Germany, hundreds of millions poured in season after season. It left in 2009 without a single race win, one of the most expensive failures the sport has ever seen. A company carrying that memory doesn't rush back to buy a team and repeat the mistake. It looks for a way to build the capability without owning the liability, which is exactly what a partnership like this delivers. A brand new state-of-the-art simulator, funded and installed by Toyota, now sits inside the Haas base in Banbury, England. Online around the middle of the 2026 season, the first the team has ever owned. The software running it, the correlation between the digital car and the real one, is increasingly Toyota's work, calibrated with data from Toyota's own testing. Here's where the honest version matters again. This doesn't mean Ferrari has been cut off. Haas still uses the Maranello wind tunnel, still buys the Ferrari engine and gearbox, still calls that relationship its foundation. Nothing has been severed. But for the first time, there's a room where Haas develops its car that Ferrari doesn't own, doesn't run, and doesn't automatically see into. The development brain that used to live in Italy now has a second home in England, and that one answers to Toyota. That single shift is the real story, and it's worth sitting with because it changes who holds the leverage. When your customer depends on you for its wind tunnel, its simulator, and its data analysis, that customer can't leave. It has nowhere to go. But when someone else quietly builds that customer a parallel version of all of it, the dependency starts to drain away. Not with an announcement, but capability by capability, until one day the team that couldn't survive without you can. There's an engine dimension to this too, and it's the piece that looks most uncomfortable for Ferrari. But it needs the most careful framing because it's where the draft version of this story goes furthest off the rails. Yes, Ferrari supplies Haas the full 2026 power unit, one of the most complex machines in the sport's history, with its near 50-50 split between combustion and electrical deployment that Komatsu himself has called the single hardest problem on the grid. And yes, Toyota's engineers work in a garage where that power unit runs every weekend. But observing how a customer engine behaves in your own car is not the same as stealing its design, and it's not what's being alleged by anyone credible. What Toyota gets isn't Ferrari's blueprints. It's something subtler and entirely legal. A long, close, real-world education in how a front-running hybrid actually behaves. The kind of understanding you can't buy, only absorb, by being in the room. Ferrari isn't being robbed. It's being quietly studied, on terms it agreed to. And that reframes the deepest fear in this whole story. The one the title points at. Because the question isn't whether Toyota is stealing from Ferrari today. It plainly isn't. The question is what happens at the end of 2028, when the engine deal expires, and Toyota has spent 4 years building Haas its own simulator, its own trained people, its own manufacturing capability in its Cologne facility in Germany, its own everything, while learning, weekend after weekend, how a championship-grade operation actually works. By then, the only thing Haas would still need from Ferrari is the engine itself. And a team that needs you for one thing is a very different partner than a team that needs you for everything. Here's the honest counterweight, and it's a real one. Toyota has stated, repeatedly and on the record, that it has no plan to build its own Formula One engine and no intention of taking the team over, that the entire purpose is developing its people and its capability. Komatsu insists the Ferrari partnership is the foundation and always will be, and that Ferrari has been kept fully informed at every step. Read it generously, and this is simply a lean team getting stronger with a partner's help, exactly as advertised. That version fits every fact on the table. Nobody can prove the darker reading. That's why it stays a question, not an accusation. But sit with the shape of what's verifiably true, and you can see why Maranello might be uneasy, whatever it says in public. A decade of quiet control built on Haas needing Ferrari for nearly everything is being slowly, legally, transparently dismantled, and replaced with a dependence on Toyota instead. Ferrari still holds the engine. It has quietly lost the rest. So here's the question worth leaving you with. Ferrari built its influence on a web of teams that couldn't afford to leave it, and Haas was the most dependent of them all. What happens to that power the day the most dependent team discovers it doesn't need you anymore? Tell me where you land in the comments. Did Toyota just quietly execute the smartest takeover in the paddock? Or is this exactly the loyal, transparent partnership everyone insists it is?